For my advanced sequencing assignment, I decided to do a BPM of 100 as I thought this could be a relatively simple tempo to use for a track. I did a really simple structure of intro, verse, chorus, middle eight, chorus. I started off the synth as the main part. I chose 4 chords that I thought could be used throughout the song. I chose E, B, C sharp and A. I found a synth that had 3 things. It had a pad, arpeggiator and rhythm section. It was called Anticipation. And basically this was really useful because it meant I could automate and bypass any section of that I wanted. So as you can see here, I bypassed the arpeggiator and rhythm section in the introduction so I could build up throughout the track. It also meant I could automate any volume that I wanted. So I automated the volume of the rhythm track so it didn't just come in really suddenly in the verse and it just came in gradually. I bussed all of these together, which meant I could edit all 3 parts of the synth together, and any effects I added to this bus would apply to all 3 of them. For example, I busted through to bus 1, which had a space designer on it. This space designer patch was called Hansa Studio, which was a stereo reverb, and it had a 2.6 second reverb time. The drums were the next part of the track that I decided to work on. I had to slow the samples that we were given, that were 130 BPM down to 100 BPM, so I used a time and pitch machine. This worked alright, it didn't sound too great, so what I had to do is I strengthened both the kick and the snare as they were stretched. It didn't sound quite so sharp, so I used Replace with Double Drum track to fit in with this, and as you can hear here, it sounds a lot more like a drum kick. Whereas this one, with both together, it sounds a lot more punchier with both of them together. I also did exactly the same with the snare drum. I used a rim shot to begin with, but it just didn't sound right, so I completely replaced this with MIDI. I basically added a lot of reverb to it as well, so it fitted in better with my piece. To introduce new parts into the mix, I used a simple and I reversed it, so it really built up into the next section. I also added a little bit of percussion into it. I did a little shaker, and I simply panned this to the left and added a little bit of reverb just to build up the drums. The vocals are one of the main parts of my track. I used an AKG C414, and once recorded, out of the 4 or 5 takes I did, I chose the best takes for each part. I bussed all of the vocals that I recorded into one bus and added effects so it would apply to all of them. I added compression, also added a bit of stereo delay just to add a little bit of ambience into it. I added a little bit of EQ just to raise up the higher end in the frequencies, just to make it a little bit clearer, and I also did a little bit of reverb into it, just to make, again, just add to the ambience. The backing vocals were the next thing I looked at. We didn't have many backing vocal takes, so basically I took one and I duplicated it down onto the other, and I panned one hard left and one hard right just to spread out the stereo field. I also added a lot of reverb and delay onto each one just so it would sit back in the mix. The next thing I looked at was the bass, and now I just used the root note of the main synth, so it went E, B, C sharp and A again. And I used an arpeggiator on this, but I used different arpeggiators for the verse and the chorus. The chorus was much more livelier than the verse. After that, I wanted to make the chorus seem a little bit more substantial, so I added in synth strings that basically played the higher notes of the main synth and plays alongside that, just to build up the chorus a little bit more. Once I was happy with everything, I then added some effects onto the output of the channel. For example, I added an adaptive limiter, which definitely kind of a punchier mix. I had an input scale of -8 dB and a gain of 9 dB. As you can tell, there's a little bit of difference, making it a little bit more punchier. The next big change was the linear phase EQ. It made it a lot more brighter. And lastly, I added the compressor just to bring everything together after mixing it all down.